All right, Wednesday night, Panther-Lair Show live here on YouTube, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. It's always fun to hang out, get the camera adjusted, get the microphone in place. Assume you can hear me. My screen's flashing again. This happened last week. Like the part of my screen that shows me what I'm seeing. It's like the lights are flashing, but the lights aren't actually flashing here in the Panther-Lair studios. So who knows what's going on? I guess that's my own private hallucination. So lucky me, get to hang out with that again tonight. But you get to hang out and talk a little Pitt sports. Is what we always do here on Wednesday nights for an hour on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com with the live Panther-Lair Show. We talk a little Pitt sports, football, basketball, recruiting. Jim Hammett from Panther-Lair.com will join us in a few minutes. And we'll just talk about everything that's going on, whether it's last night's loss to Syracuse, the new coaching hires that came out yesterday, recruiting, transfer portal, and anything else on your mind. And so we always say, if you are watching the live stream and you want to ask a question or post a comment, do it over there on the right-hand side of the screen. Or in the chat, you can post it and we'll answer and respond to as many as we can. Of course, if you want to make sure we read your comment or answer your question, you can be a super chatter. Click that little $sign down at the bottom of the chat screen, kick a couple bucks to the podcast, and we will appreciate your support and definitely get to your comment, definitely get to your question. Of course, some housekeeping items or bookkeeping items or whatever you want to call it. Like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. And check out the website, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. So you can stay up on all of the Pitt sports news. Panther-Lair.com, I think it's the best online source of Pitt sports news that you're going to find. Got the best online community of Pitt fans that you're going to find. If you're a Pitt fan, you like to read Pitt content, you like to interact with other Pitt fans, the best place to do all of those things is at Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. So check that out right now. Keep this window open. Keep your browser window open to YouTube so you don't miss the live stream, but go check out the site, Panther-Lair.com. And of course, our YouTube channel here, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com, where we put all of our Pitt video content, the morning Pitt videos Monday through Friday, the weekly live stream like we're doing right here on a Wednesday night at 8 o'clock. And post-game shows, we'll do those after the road basketball games. Pitt's at Duke on Saturday. I think we all have an idea about how that's going to go. And but we'll do a live post-game show after that. So even if it goes really bad, which it probably will, or it seems like there's a good chance that it will, we can all get together on a Saturday night and throw a few back, right? I mean, we'll certainly have the bourbon out. For one reason or another, the bourbon will be involved. And so, but that's the Pennsylvania straight bourbon. I think it's Pennsylvania bourbon or whatever. I have no idea what distinguishes one from the other, but it's just not I'm not a connoisseur in that regard, I guess. But you can hang out and we'll all talk about the game. So we should do it on Saturday night. And the place to do it is right here, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. So again, like this video and subscribe, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. All right, let's bring in Jim. He's out there in Johnstown, I believe, right? Yeah, Jim, you look like you're in the same place. Nothing has changed.
Yeah.
You tell the difference between like Kentucky whiskey or Kentucky bourbon and Pennsylvania bourbon?
Well, I thought like if it comes from Kentucky, it's bourbon and everything else is whiskey. I could be wrong, but like I thought like that's the distinguishing factor. If it's made in Kentucky, then it's bourbon.
Yeah, well, whiskey is like the broad term, right? Like to encompass like bourbon, scotch. There might be something else, but anyway, the Pennsylvania one that I got, it calls itself bourbon. So I had to do a shot of it after the Louisville game, just like in honor of Josh Newark already says that you're wrong, Jim. So Jim is wrong. I'll just leave that. I'll leave that there until we get another.
Leave it up for a while.
But Josh points out, yeah, you got something going on with your audio, Jim. Do you not have your typical audio setup that you usually do?
So I'm trying new headphones because I thought the old headphones weren't working, but I'll go back to the old headphones. Give me one second.
This one sounds weird. I'm going to say, I'm still going to leave Josh's message of Jim is wrong on the screen there just because it's funny to me. But yeah, definitely didn't sound as good. I wonder if that's what it was like last week.
Is it better?
I think it's better. Keep talking. Keep telling us things that are wrong about bourbon.
So apparently I don't know anything about bourbon. So thanks for pointing that out, Josh. And we'll leave up Jim is wrong for a while. I guess it's fine.
Jim is wrong can stay there. It sounds a little better. It's not as good as you usually are, though. I don't know. I mean, it's an improvement over the other headphones, but it's not up to the standards. You know, you're not meeting the standards. So,
I don't know what I can do differently. These are
oh,
the two
that's
headphones.
okay. That's okay. Actually, it sounds fine. It sounds fine. All right, we're gonna take Jim is wrong off there. Yeah, bourbon, whatever. You don't drink much like whiskey, do you? Beer guy.
Here and there, yeah, probably here and there, but not so much.
Yeah. Yeah, I do it during live streams after Pitt games. That's like when I spend the most of my time. I want to get into. There's a couple comments and questions that already popped up. So like Josh Newark, before he said Jim is wrong, he said Pat Narduzzi seems to, for better or worse, embrace changing coaches, especially offensive coordinators. Do you think Jeff Capel taking the opposite approach is hurting him and something that needs to occur? And obviously, we're going to talk a lot about Pitt basketball tonight. We're going to talk about that Syracuse game yesterday and kind of what's going on with this team. But this is something interesting. I mean, this is year 6 for Capel. Even if things are going really well, whether they're going really well, really poorly, or right down the middle, keeping one coaching staff together for 6 years feels pretty unheard of. Like I mean, he's had like some guys move on. That guy who came here from Marquette, who was like the connection to Greg Elliott, I forget his name. He went somewhere and became like a full-time assistant. But I mean, he's kept like this same main group of like Milan Brown, Jason Capel, and Tim O'Toole together. It's almost sort of remarkable that it's stuck together this long, regardless of what the outcome has been, or regardless of what the results have been. Are you surprised? Does that surprise you as much as it surprises me?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, it's just like the coaching profession in general is just very transient. Like you don't usually like. I mean, we say that after like Tim Salem and Andre Powers is here for a decade, but but for the most part, I mean, it is a very transient profession. I mean, you don't stick around in one place for this long, and especially for a team that's had 4 losing seasons out of 5 so far. I mean, you try to shake things up. And so, I mean, I guess, yeah, I mean, you can say Narduzzi is embracing the change. He is trying a lot of different things. I made the analogy in my 3-2-1 column is he's just trying the opposite. He's doing everything completely different. So, yeah, I mean, yeah, as of right now, as of where things stands for both programs, it does seem like Narduzzi's willing to change more than Capel right now.
And he always has. I mean, he's, we often joke about how often he changes, coordinators and this and that. He is kind of taking like a Costanza approach to this offseason of doing things opposite, whether it's, just a totally different type of offense with Cade Bell or some of these young guys. I think, I mean, I couldn't find an exact age on these newest hires, but I think Jeremy Darveau is the oldest, and he can't be much more than like 41, 42. He graduated from Louisville in 2000. Well, he played at Louisville in 2004 and 2005. So if you assume he was maybe 22 at that point, that would put him at what, 41 years old, maybe 42. I mean, he's not like, and he's the oldest of these 4 hires. Like Lindsey Lamar played, against Pitt in 2012. Bronowski's not that old. Cade Bell is in his 30s. He has completely reversed course on basically everything. I mean, whether it's the age of the coaches he's hiring or the style of coaches that he's hiring, he's completely reversed course. And, I guess you can't accuse him of being stubborn anymore. The interesting thing about Capel and his staff is we often hear about Heather Lyke forcing staff changes, or she needs to do this or needs to do that. She told, Narduzzi to fire Frank Signetti. If Jeff Capel's gone through the depths that he has gone and she hasn't forced a coaching change there, I think it's a pretty good indicator that she doesn't really step in that regard. You know what I mean? And maybe there's less, on a football staff, everybody's got, I think, more defined responsibilities than on a basketball staff. I mean, they'll have like, oh, this guy works with the guards, this guy works with the bigs, but it's far less defined. It's sort of like specifically accountable than it is on the football staff. So maybe that's part of it, but I don't know. It is weird that they've all stuck together and, through some pretty bad times. I don't know. I guess the fans all want to fire Jason, right? That he's always been the nepotism whipping boy, right?
I mean, it has always come off that way, but I mean, like, obviously when he built this staff, guys he's comfortable with. It's his brother, it's Tim O'Toole, who I think worked at Duke, and it's Milan Brown, who was friends with his father, or whoever had connections there. So like all three of them like made sense when he hired them. Like they all had, some of them had, actually all three of them had head coaching experience, which is kind of very unique. But I don't know. I mean, I think just for the sake of trying something different, and you know, we saw what a couple of, like sometime during the Dixon tenure, like he started hiring different guys. So who was it? Smoke Williamson, the guy from Michigan. Like they thought they were going to get all these guys from whatever that AAU program is up there. But like usually you try things like that to like, okay, this guy's tied to one prospect. Let's hire him on the staff and do that. So I don't know. I think just for the sake of trying something different, it makes a lot of sense. But I mean, on the surface, I get why like that this staff was put in place in the first place.
I think Pat Scarry. Do you remember Pat Scarry being on the staff at on Dixon's staff? I think he was like the lead recruiter.
He was the Ken Birch guy.
For Ken Birch, right? Exactly. I'm trying to see where he is. Is he?
He was at Townsend, I think.
I found him on here on the Townsend. It says head coach. I want to see if that's still the case. So he's the head coach there. And one of his assistants' first name is Parfait. But I digress. I remember when Scary left before Kem actually enrolled. And so there was all this like big question of like, oh, is Kem still going to stay with it? Because he was like, Scary was the main connection for Kem Birch. And, you know, Kem Birch was like impossible to get a hold of, like had always been, as you can imagine, like a 5-star guy like him was always really tough. And I still remember like, and this is just why like it's just one of those memory lane recruiting stories where like somehow we had a number for one of his like teammates. And so I started texting his teammate this and that, trying to like work up to like, hey, can you get me on the phone with your teammate? But you got to like, I didn't want to like just text him out of nowhere and be like, hey, can you have Kem call me? Because everybody was trying to do that. But eventually I got to the point where like this kid's like, yeah, let me see. I'll see what I can do. I'll see if I can help you. And so I'm sitting there. I'm like, all right. And I forget where he was, Massachusetts or something, whatever. But my phone rings. It's a number I don't know. And this was however long ago, 10 years ago, more. Back when you could answer phone numbers you didn't know, because it wasn't just like the blood bank calling or insurance companies or whatever calls me now. And so I answer my phone. I'm like, hello. And this guy, and all I hear is just his voice. He goes, this is Kem. And I'm like, whoa.
Oh, here it is.
Like, you know, wide awake. I'm like, oh, Kem, hey, how's it going? Blah, blah, blah. Like, and like, I don't know if you were on the site at that time or, you know, if you remember way back then, but he was basically like, yeah, I don't know. I have to figure it out. I don't know what I'm going to do. I still have to decide, I guess. I don't know what I'm going to do. And so I just wrote it. I wrote what he said. And I was like, look, this is what he said. And there was a big like to do. I remember Brandon Knight was on the staff at that point and went on like the Fan. And was like, yeah, there's a report out there and it's taking his words out of context. I'm like, bro, he only said like 4 words. And these were the 4. He's like, I don't know what I'm going to do. He didn't take anything out of context. No, obviously he still ended up like sticking with Pitt and all this stuff. But that was, you know, we jump through some hoops sometimes on getting recruiting interviews. And that's one that I always remember just because of like answering the phone, hello. And this is Kem. And I'm like, whoa, I've never spoken to you before. Holy cow. This is amazing. RJC Man's tired. Look at this. RJC Man, Z's. He doesn't like hearing the Pitt recruiting stories. So let's we'll get to one of RJC Man's comments here. It says Capel is clearly struggling to find the team's identity. At some point, we just need to judge his win-loss record, and that should be enough to fire his. It looks like he's cleverly used parentheses and underscores to make 2 butt cheeks. Is that what you're seeing there, Jim? Does that look like butt cheeks? Yeah. No, now we've lost your audio entirely, Jimbo. So we, I don't know. It still didn't sound great, but yeah, you're muted. So I'm going to respond to RJC Man 38 here. I believe you would agree that it looks like he made a very clever, very adult version. Oh, I just heard you. I think you're back now. You know, butt cheeks. So he says, number 1, Capel is clearly struggling to find his team's identity. I don't agree with that assessment. I think he knows very well what his team's identity is. He knows his team's identity is they have no interior scoring presence, right? And we talk about this every week. No, they can't score inside. They don't have centers who can score, in the paint near the basket. So he knows that part of his team's identity. And he knows that if they're going to score, if their team is going to score, it's going to be Blake Hinson shooting threes. It's going to be the guards ideally driving, but also pulling up for jump shots. That is the team's identity. They're just not doing a very good job of it right now. He's not struggling to find the team's identity. He knows very well what it is, and I don't think he's wrong about it. They're just not doing it very well. They had open shots last night. They had good looks at the basket last night, and they missed them. They missed a whole lot of them. Blake Hinson going 4 of 17 is not the team's identity, but he's supposed to be shooting a lot. You know, Bub Carrington shooting 0 of 10 is not what's supposed to happen, you know, and actually him shooting 0 of 7, him attempting 7 3-pointers is problematic enough. I don't think there's any issue with finding the team's identity. It's just, can they actually execute the identity, which last year they were able to execute this identity. And this year they're struggling to do so. I mean, you've pointed out the sub 60 stat, you know, how they've scored sub 60 in the Carolina and the Duke games. They've now done it 3 out of the last 4 games. They've scored less than 60 points. They're just not executing. They're getting decent shots. They're getting good looks, but they're not making them. And I don't think that's an issue of finding identity or knowing the team's identity. They know the identity. They're running plays for that identity. It's just not, they're not making the plays.
Yeah, I agree with the identity thing. I mean, they play about 7 or 8 guys, and nobody's like miscast. Nobody's doing like being asked to do something they're not able to do. I mean, like this is who all these guys are, and we kind of knew the limitations going in. So, I mean, I guess from a program standpoint, like, yeah, like they could have had a better offseason. Like they missed on a lot of transfer guards that they wanted to get, and that's definitely playing a factor. And they've had some. You could see on the roster, they're missing a couple shooters. They're missing a big, tough guy in the middle. I mean, those are things they could have done in the offseason to prevent this from now. But as far as an identity with what they have, like, I think they're going about it the right way. They're getting good looks. It's just like these dudes that were making them at like a 40 and 35% clip a month ago are now shooting it much lower. That's kind of what it is.
Yeah. And then, you know, RJ Seaman goes on to say at some point we need to judge Capel's win-loss record. And sure, I mean, like absolutely, every coach is ultimately judged on their win-loss record, but I think you're not telling the whole story if you ignore some of the context that surrounds it. I mean, you can't deny the situation that he came into. You can't deny the situation that he took over and how bad that situation was. You can't deny the impact that COVID had on, you know, Capel and his recruiting. You can't deny the impact that it had. I mean, it you know, COVID impacted a lot of teams and their ability to recruit, but it certainly had an impact on Pitt as he was trying to, you know, some crucial classes as he was trying to build the team and build the program and really kind of struggled due to COVID. You can't deny those things. And some of the things, you know, you have bad luck. There was some bad luck with the Dior Johnson situation, bad luck with this, bad luck with that. Some of it is, you know, bad personnel decisions because you brought in guys who maybe didn't have the best character, you know, or maybe they just made bad decisions. Ultimately, he will get judged simply on his record. But in the meantime, I don't think you can completely ignore it. And you also can't completely ignore the fact that he went through those first 4 years and then turned it around. He showed that he could put together a team that could succeed. He could put together a team that could win. And I mean, last year was a really good year. You know what I mean? Last year was a really good year. They didn't collapse in January and February like they had so many times. I mean, that performance in the NCAA tournament was, I mean, almost legendary, I think, for what they were able to accomplish, the odds that were stacked against them, and how they were able to go out and win 2 games. Yes, you have to judge him on his win-loss record, but you got to judge him on those things too. I mean, that's all part of the story, right?
Yeah, I think it's all part of the story. But at a certain point, like that kind of cuts off a little bit. I mean, now that we're in year 6, it's like, yeah, COVID happened. Yeah, the first 2 years he walked into a bad situation. But like the way college basketball works these days, it's you build a roster from year to year. It's very rare that you can just build up a program. And so I think that's kind of where fan frustration gets in. It's like, oh, yeah, we can go get Burton, Cummings, and Elliott and do the thing, but you have to do it every year. And I think there was just some misses this year. You're kind of relying on some freshman guards who aren't, you know, the top 10 guards in the country. So I think a part of it is that, but like, I get the frustration because you could be like, yeah, the Twins can probably get better next year. So can Carrington, so can Lowe, but you have no idea if any of those guys are coming back. And I think that's kind of where everyone is right now. It's like, man, like I just don't know. And it's not going well. And we can see how college basketball works and how guys can leave at a moment's notice.
Whatever you did, Jim, you sound great. I mean, this is the best you've sounded all night. So that was really good. Yeah.
I'm on
somehow
headphones everywhere.
Well, it sounds fantastic. RJC Man wanted us to get to his other comment. So he was a super chatter for it. And we appreciate that. He says, Capel is not the guy. Look at all the empty seats at the Pete. Yeah, there's a lot of empty seats. Pitt fans, I think it took a long time to build up what Pitt had in the 2000s in terms of the fan support and the Stallings and really the waning years of the Dixon era, plus the Stallings years. And then the struggles that Pitt had in the first 4 years under Capel, it took a toll on the fan base. And it's going to take, those kind of struggles, I think, would take a toll on a lot of fan bases. And I think it's certainly the case with Pitt. It's not like they were a strong fan base, a strong basketball fan base when they were winning. You know what I mean? But when they dipped, when they fell off, and they fell off for multiple years in a row, the fans went away and they didn't really come back. And they really didn't even come back last year. Even when it was really humming along last year, you still didn't have like that really packed crowd. And I mean, the biggest crowds that we've seen either last year and this year were crowds where you could attribute it to the visiting team. I mean, the Carolina game, there were a lot of people there. There were a lot of people cheering for Carolina. The Duke game, same thing. Syracuse last year was like packed, and it was packed because there were a lot of Syracuse fans there. There were a lot of people wearing orange, and that's just sort of the nature of the fan base. And it's going to take more than 1 year making the NCAA tournament again for them to get 12,000 in the building every night, even for conference games. And so is that on Capel? It's on Capel in that he didn't turn it around sooner. If he had 2 rough years and then the last 3 were all really good in tournament years, then yeah, maybe it would be built back up. But it's only been 1 year, and it was 4 bad years before that, and now it's slipping again. And so, Capel is not the guy. Look at all the empty seats at the Pete is what he says. I don't really connect the two. And if you made a new hire, like I've seen some people on the message boards, Jim, that are like, if you bring Capel back again, there's going to be nobody at the Pete. I don't care who you hire. There's going to be nobody at the Pete next year. You know what I mean? Unless they somehow turn this around, they're not getting 10,000 for their non-conference games. They're not getting 10,000 for conference games next year. Unless they somehow have a big turnaround and finish this year on a really high note and get to the Sweet 16 or something. They're not drawing big crowds next year. I don't know who they could. I guess if they hired Nick Saban, but or Taylor Swift. If they hired Taylor Swift to be the Pitt basketball coach, they would get 12,500 for every game. But short of that, maybe if they hired Travis Kelce, because then Taylor would come to the games. But I don't know who else is going to pack that building. I mean, honestly, like you have to have minimum, I was going to say like 5 years of sustained success or so. You have to have multiple years of sustained high-level success before you're really going to pack that place consistently.
Well, did you see a couple weeks ago whenever Baylor just opened a brand new arena, and there was an article that came out with it, and I think Baylor just won a national championship, and I think the new place only holds like 8,000. And yeah. I think it was like Matt Norlander and one of the college basketball writers was saying, maybe more schools should do that. Like there's so many like big empty arenas, and I think COVID did take a hit on attendance in college basketball. So is 12,500, is that too much for Pitt?
I don't feel like that's a big number. I mean, like that doesn't seem like a lot. 12, there are arenas that, right, like what's like the Dean Dome hold, or even the Coliseum at West Virginia. I mean, don't those hold like 18,000, 20,000 or something? I mean, maybe Cameron's pretty small, I guess, but I don't know. I don't feel like 12,000 is that big of a number. I mean, maybe I'm overestimating it. Maybe just because, the bulk of my experience in that building, or at least the early years, were, with having no problem packing 12,500 people into that in there. But so are you suggesting they tear down the Pete and build a new A new multi-purpose sports facility in that space.
What would you do if Pitt did like a Syracuse thing and like just had like football and basketball in all one place, like right on that, right where the Pete is right now? Would you be in favor of that, against it? What would you think of it?
So football in a dome, huh?
Inside football in Pittsburgh.
Yeah. I don't mind that at, like we've talked about it a bunch of times, going to the dome once a year or, once every other year for football, but I don't really, I'm not, I wouldn't want to do it every game. You know what I mean? And it seems like the basketball experience would be lame, but I don't know. I mean, no, they're not. I mean, what are we talking about? Where are we going here? They're not going to, they're not going to do anything with the Pete. Yeah. I mean, they're not doing anything with the Pete. So that's not going to change. No, it's success. Success is the only thing. It's the same thing in football. You have to win. You have to win at a high level. You have to make yourself relevant. And where Pitt was able to fill the seats is because it became an event to go to a Pitt basketball game. It became an event in the city. Jerome Bettis was there. Ben Roethlisberger was there. And, like it was an event. I mean, everybody in the city wanted to go to Pitt basketball games. And that's not the case right now. And it'll only be the case, if they start winning again, because there is a group of Pitt basketball, like, diehards that are always going to be there, but they're a small group. And like, you can look at any number of things. You can look at like content, right? Like what kind of content draws the most interest, football or basketball? It's always football. You can look at the message boards. Where's the most activity? It's always on the football side. If something happens football wise, more people are going to be talking about it than if something happens basketball wise. I did the morning Pitt video this morning talking about the Syracuse game yesterday. And one of the comments on the video was, man, Pitt just hired 3 new assistant coaches. Why are we talking about this basketball stuff? And I'm like, Jesus, dude, you want me to do you want me to talk about the O-line coach and the running backs, which is actually what I'm going to talk about on tomorrow's morning Pitt. So it's not that crazy of an idea. I have this fruit fly that is just like tormenting me. This is why I keep like swatting my hand around. Somehow
it seems like you're talking demonstratively.
I'm not. I'm trying to get this stupid thing out of my face. It's like there's one fruit fly in every room, and he just like orbits me like a moon or something. That's no moon. It's a fruit fly. What was I even? Oh yeah. I mean, like, so the interest, it's a very passionate part of the fan base, and the people who are into Pitt basketball. I mean, we know people who have been like as adamantly strong about Pitt basketball for their entire lives. They are Pitt basketball people, but the vast majority are football. And that's part of the city we grew up in. The city that we're in. It's a football town more than a basketball town, but it's also a winning town. So if Pitt basketball is winning, everybody wants to go see them, and they'll sell out again. But if they're not, like, I don't care what coach you hire, if they don't provide the wins, you're not going to sell any tickets. You're not going to pack the seats, and that's the case for football, but it's just on it's on a different scale. Like football, their bad attendance games are like 35,000. Basketball, their bad attendance games are 5,000.
Yep. And I mean, it even like go back to like when the Pete opened, like it just happened at the exact same time, like the whole program was lifting off. So it was like the perfect for both cases. But like if the Pete opened and they weren't very good, like those like years of like all the Steelers being there sold out for even when they played Coppin State, like that never would have happened.
Yeah. Yep. No. You're right. That was a good confluence of events there for sure. Josh Newark says the regression of Federico is really disappointing. He isn't producing offensively, and he seemed to get abused last night on the defensive end by not grabbing rebounds and allowing Syracuse extra possessions. I don't know what's going on with Federico. There are times where, and we've said this at various points, and I don't want to be rude, I don't want to be mean, or crass or anything like that, but like he looks like he's touching a basketball for the first time. Like there was a play last night I can remember. I mean, he was perfectly positioned for a rebound, and I think he grabbed it and just stepped out of bounds. Or he was perfectly positioned for a rebound, and he just didn't get it. And everybody in the arena groaned because they saw him like right where he needed to be. He's got the height. He's in position, and he just doesn't get the rebound. And it's really frustrating to watch. I didn't have high expectations for him offensively. I didn't think he was going to do anything. I didn't think he was going to score this year. I didn't think he was going to average more than like 5 points per game or something. But he is just, and he's not the only one, but he just provides so very little in terms of positive outcomes on the court. I mean, just really, the phrase that I guess you've used it, I think Steven Gertz has used it too, referring to a number of players, is just unplayable.
Yeah.
And last night, I mean, it was at a point, and part of it was because Fetty and Guillermo were in foul trouble. But last night, I mean, we saw multiple times where they had a lineup of, here's one at the just under the 5-minute mark. Actually, it was earlier than that. They had Lowe, Carrington, Leggett, Jefferson, Hinson, and then they took out, one of those guys, Lowe, and brought in Zach Austin. So it was Carrington, Leggett, Austin, Jefferson, and Hinson. And again, Guillermo and Fetty had 2 fouls each at that point, but I think he even went back to it. I thought there was a point in the second half. Actually, the under 16 timeout. The under 16, actually, even earlier than that, under 17 minutes, he went with Lowe, Carrington, Austin, Hinson, and Jeffress. I mean, like, in what world is it a better option to have, like, I don't even know who you would count as playing the 5 in that lineup. Hinson, I guess.
Yeah, maybe Jeffress. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of how I wrote it down, but I really don't know who was doing it. And he did it for, I mean, that was the 16:50 mark. They went to that lineup and stayed with it until the 11:26 mark. So more than 5 minutes of basketball with no center on the court. And I mean, Syracuse isn't the biggest team in the ACC, but they've got some size. But it was a better option just to not even try to have a center out there. It's like, we'd rather have 0 than negative, is what they ultimately went with. Because at this point, Federico and Guillermo are providing negatives, which is a really tough situation. And I think Guillermo is probably more disappointing to me than Federico, because it looked at certain points like Guillermo was going to take a step toward being a pretty decent offensive contributor, but he's not even doing that right now. I mean, forget Jorge. We're not even going to talk about Jorge. Guillermo is just, you're getting nothing out of those guys. Nothing positive on either end of the court.
Yeah, I mean, to talk about Federico, I mean, I think we all knew, like, his offense was limited. It was limited last year, but they got away with it because they had veteran guards and they put the ball in a position where all he had to do is catch and dunk. He didn't have to think about it. He didn't have to do anything else. Just catch the ball and dunk it. And I don't know if he's not being set up as well this year, but they're not really giving him a reason to pass the ball either. So
he can't do it.
Yeah.
He can't do it. When they do pass it, he can't finish a lob. And when they get the ball to him, either the ball bounces out of his hands or he misses a dunk. I mean, we've seen him miss dunks. The guy's like 7 feet tall, and we've seen him miss dunks. Like, they probably stopped going to him because why would you give him the ball at this point? And again, I don't want to be mean-spirited about it, but damn, he is. I mean, I feel like even when he's set up well, he's still not converting. He's still not finishing, despite, basically he puts his arms up and the ball is at the hoop and he still can't finish it.
That's what, like, I mean, I go back to the preseason whenever, Papa Conte got injured. And I remember just thinking, it's like, I didn't know how many minutes were going to go around because I was pretty high on Guillermo and I didn't think Fetty would take a step back. So in my head, I was like, that's probably okay. He probably needs time to, get up to speed. But like, that's actually looking like a loss right now. Like, they actually need like another option. They need a third option at center and they don't have it right now. So that turned out to be, I mean, I'm not exactly sure what Papa Conte is going to be as a college player, but they miss having a third 6'11" body they can throw in there at least.
Yeah. Just for another option. And I really don't think he could provide less than what they're getting right now. And my biggest takeaways from last night were more about, Blake Hinson and Bub Carrington combining to go 4 of 27, I think, from the floor.
Yeah.
They, I think I did the math. They took 41% of Pitt's field goal attempts and made like 12% of their makes, of the team's makes. I mean, it was just, that was the reason they lost as much as anything. The final 10 minutes of the first half, Pitt went 2 of 12 from the floor. In those 10 misses, 4 of them were Carrington and 3 of them were Hinson. I mean, those guys shot Pitt out of that game. And they weren't the only guys who missed, buckets in those final 10 minutes. And that was the stretch where the game changed because Pitt was up 6 points going into that 10-minute stretch. They played Syracuse even 32-32 in the second half. That 10-minute stretch there where Syracuse outscored them 23-6, I think it was, that was the game. You know what I mean? That was the ball game right there because they couldn't get a basket. And I keep talking about this. I talked about it on the Morning Pit today. I think you and I have talked about it. They got Hinson back, and that's great. And he can hit the threes and all that stuff like he did last year. But what they don't have back is Burton and Cummings and their ability to make a shot when Pitt needed a shot. Now, they weren't 100%. Pitt obviously still lost games. There were points in the Notre Dame game, the Miami game, and so on and so forth when Pitt needed them to make a shot and they couldn't come up. But a whole lot, those two guys would make shots when Pitt needed a shot. If they needed to stop another team's run, if they needed to extend a run or just swing the momentum of a game, those guys, a whole bunch, were able to come up with a shot. And they don't have that this year. Blake Hinson is not that guy. And I forget if I said it last night or Chris Carter said it. We were talking after the game. One of us said it. They're like, there's a difference between being a team's leading scorer and a team's leader. And I think we're seeing that. And I think there was a lot of belief and hope that Blake Hinson could grow into that role. And maybe he is off the court, but he's not giving them what they need in terms of leadership on the court because he can't make that shot when they absolutely need it, or he's not making that shot when they absolutely need it. They needed a shot in those 10 minutes. And all they got were, do you know who scored Pitt's 2 baskets in that 10-minute stretch?
William Jeffers.
One guy, Will Jeffers. That's all the offense you can get is 2 buckets from Will Jefferson. One was a feed from Guillermo, and one was a feed from Ishmael Leggett. And I mean, that's it. So that's my biggest thing with Hinson right now. I mean, he's obviously missing shots. I think he's pressing, but he's pressing because he wants to be that guy that Burton and Cummings were. But I just don't think he's it, Well,
I think part of it is it kind of just goes back to his game itself. I mean, he's just not a guy that could put the ball on the floor and make a play happen like those guys could. Like Jabarius Burton was not a very good 3-point shooter at all. Like he when the team's going, the other team's on a 10-0 run and Pitt needed a basket, he would just go straight to the basket and get one. Like that's what he would do. And Hinson can't do that. So, I mean, you see him and none of his shots are like anything like I'm against. Like, I'm like, yeah, like if that goes in, like that's kind of what gets him going. But like he can't get that one to get himself over the hump. I've seen Blake Hinson make terrible shots, like shots he should have never taken, but they go in. But that usually gets him going. But he just can't get that one. Like, and it's been that story for about 3 weeks now.
He had one from the logo last night or close to it. And he was wide open. And the pass went out to him and he hesitated for a second. And then and he pulled up for it and let it fly. And everybody in the building knew. Like it was one of those like things that happens in slow motion. You know what I mean? Like a car crash or something where you're thinking like 1,000 thoughts as this is going on. And I think everybody in the building, as the ball was flying through the air, was thinking, okay, this is either going to be the shot that is the huge spark that turns it around and gets them all going, or he's going to miss this and they're going to lose this game. And I feel like everybody, however many were there, everybody in the building was thinking that. And he missed it because he missed almost everything last night. But it's just, he's not getting those shots. He's not making those shots. Jalen Lowe did more of it last night than I think Blake Hinson has done just about all season. In terms of making shots when Pitt needed shots. He scored half their points in the second half. Did you see that? 16 points in the second half. They scored 32. He had half of them. And he cut it to single digits twice by himself. He cut it to single digits twice. But it wasn't enough. It's not enough just to have one guy. And I don't know what's up with Bub Carrington and how he has kind of fallen off, but at least Lowe is ascending. That's the bright spot, right? I mean, that's the good story right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think with this basketball team, it's like we always diagnose one problem. And for the longest time, it's like, who's going to be the fourth scorer? Who's going to be that guy? It looks like Jalen Lowe. And that's awesome. They got that going. But then, okay, now Blake Hinson and Bob Carrington can't shoot shots. They can't defend the interior. They're crumbling. They can't score in general. So, it's like, yeah, they figured out the one thing, but then, 3 other things came at them. And it just kind of feels like that's been the season all along. It's like, yeah, one thing, one step forward, two steps back, and it's been like that all year.
Yeah. RJC man is he threw in another super chat, and I think he had a few typos, so he resent it. So we'll send the one that spells it out a little better. It says the team has no defensive identity. They get physically dominated. Whose fault is that? I don't know if it's physically, or I think they get, I don't want to say they get mentally dominated. I think they make a lot of mistakes. Jeff Capel had a comment last night where I think Noah asked him about JJ Starling hadn't been playing very well, but then he went off last night, and Capel was like, yeah, that seems to happen a lot against us, where guys who aren't doing very well seem to have big games. Well, it's because you're leaving them open for shots, and Duke made a couple tough shots. Syracuse made a couple tough shots. But a lot of times it was just perimeter defense was bad. They were, they weren't defending around the rim very good. I mean, it seemed like mistakes. And a lot of times that, there's that old thing of like offensive struggles carry over to the defensive side. They lose energy. They don't keep up the energy they need on defense. And it all kind of snowballs like that. And I think there's probably part of that too. But it's just hard for me, even though they gave up Syracuse shot like 47% last night and almost 60% from three. I still can't get past the offense. You know what I mean? I still can't get past this team's struggles to get like three guys going at the same time, which it feels like they haven't done that in forever. And they've got a lot of good candidates, like you were just talking about before, about like they've got Carrington, they've got Lowe, they've got Hinson, they've got Leggett, Austin with his chaos points. But they can't get three guys going at the same time. And until they do, I kind of don't care how good of offense or how good of defense they play. They're not going to win games like 56-54. Like that's just not going to happen. They're going to have to get into the 60s, and it's going to be from their offense. I mean, their defense can improve, right? But it's just, that's down the list of concerns for me. I don't know about you.
No, I'm with you. I mean, it's hard to get worked up about the defense when I tweeted it last night. They've had 4 conference games at home, and they've only scored over 60, or they've only got to 70 once. They're averaging 59 points against ACC competition at home. They're just not scoring. So, like, it doesn't matter if, they close out a little bit better or rebound. I think they even out-rebounded Syracuse, and that's one thing we've been calling for them to do. I mean, they're doing some things, but it's like you're missing a million shots. It's like they were, 5 of 26 from 3? I mean, like,
yeah,
I don't care what they're doing on defense if they can't score.
They had 15 offensive rebounds last night and scored 10 second chance points. Like that's bad. I mean, like, I just don't know how they can't. You would think that would set it up. You know what I mean? And that was something they were doing good earlier there in the season. They were doing really well. They were doing really well on the rebounding. They were converting the second chance points. They were getting, putbacks and all that stuff, but it just wasn't, happening last night. All right, let's see what else people are saying in here. Scrolling through. John Kristovich points out that Pitt can still make the NCAA tournament. It's true. You see any lies detected there, Jim?
They can.
There we go.
I'm not betting on it.
Byron Fleck wants to know, how is it possible to evaluate Capel's job performance without knowing if Alliance 412 is offering competitive money to players? I know they are. I can answer that for you, Byron. They are, and they did, and they have. I mean, a good portion of this year's team, virtually every contributor, I would say, is, what's the language? I get so bored with trying to come up with different ways of saying this. Every player who's contributing on this team this year is getting paid by Alliance 412. That's reality. And like, that's guys that they needed to cut deals with to get them to come back, and guys they needed to cut deals with to get the newcomers to come in. And so I can evaluate Capel's job performance based on that. I mean, I think for this year, at least for this past offseason, he had ample support from Alliance 412 and put together the roster that he's got. The biggest thing, or not the biggest, well, one of the biggest things, and we've talked about it a million times, and you alluded to it earlier, of the, struggles of trying to get a guard out of the portal this offseason. I think a lot of guards were turned off by what they saw on Pitt's roster. And they saw 2 incoming freshmen who, if you're a transfer guard, and we talked about this at the time, we've talked about this a bunch of times. If you were a transfer senior and you're looking at Pitt as a possible destination and you see 2 freshmen coming in, those guys are going to play. And then you see Dior Johnson, you're like, I don't really know if I'm going to get a lot of minutes here, coach. I'm not sure how you're going to fit me in among all these 4-star guys that you've got. And I think that turned a lot of guards away. It would be really nice to have a 4th guard right now. Somebody you could rotate in. You could play more 3-guard lineups. You could be more flexible with how little you play centers. But they weren't able to get somebody. And I think part of it is the guards that they had. And so maybe Alliance 412 could have been more competitive there. But I think Alliance 412 did quite a bit this offseason to help put this roster together. As an aside, Jim, did you happen to read Noah's article on Gavin Bartholomew, his interview with Gavin?
Yeah.
I thought, seeing Gavin say very explicitly, basically, I went to them with a number and they were able to get close enough that I felt good about coming back. I feel like we all talk about things in those terms, right? And we've all sort of acknowledged things as existing in those terms. But I don't think we've seen too many players, coaches, anyone sort of directly involved in the process speak about it that sort of explicitly. Like not just at Pitt, just across the country. Like, do you remember anybody like being that sort of direct and candid about what the process really is?
No, and it's still like, you hear those numbers get thrown out, but there's no way to verify them. You hear one person talk about those numbers and
right.
Then you hear a different number about the same player. And I mean, but nobody has ever said it like Gavin. I mean, I was it 2 years ago or before this season, I think, someone said like, oh, Drake May got offered $1 million. He's like, no, I didn't. But like some people were like, no, he did. But like, you never really knew. So,
right.
I mean, I think like Gavin was pretty upfront about the process. And again, I mean, obviously tampering's not a thing. Like you can make your intentions known before these guys are in the transfer portal. And a lot of that is happening.
Yeah. I was, I wouldn't say I was shocked by the quotes, but I was surprised that he would be so explicit. Back to basketball. William Richter says, I like the core guys we have, but we need to get low key, gritty, proven players who can make shots in your face, play defense, get stops, and are leaders through and through. Yeah. I think that sounds good. What do you think, Jim? I think William's honest. I think William has a good idea. I think they should get players like that, right?
Well, I mean, I like the core guys too. And I mean, and 10 years ago, like, yeah, like this would be an excited group that's going through growing pains, but they'd be better next year. But we don't know what the core group's going to look like next year.
Yeah, that's a really tricky part of it for sure. We've talked about that a bunch of times of like, would it be nice if you could be like, man, just imagine how good these guys are going to be a lot better next year. And like when Lowe and Carrington are juniors, look out. They're going to make noise. That could be a Final Four team if you fill in the right pieces around them. But who knows where Lowe's going to be in 2 years, next year? Who knows where Carrington's going to be next year or in 2 years? It's tough. Peninsula P says, I would start Austin at the 5 and insert Leggett back into the starting lineup. What do you think of that, Jim?
Well, I'm trying to think. So who's guarding Filipowski on Saturday?
Doesn't matter.
Or Mark Mitchell or any of these people.
Does it matter? I mean, like really, does it matter? More to the point, now you have Filipowski guarding Zach Austin, right? Or
matter?
Mitchell's guarding Zach Austin. So maybe he can, I don't know, but maybe what, like, I mean, in all seriousness, my one issue with that lineup is you pretty much have all your best players right there. Yeah. Like what happens when you go to sub in? If you've got Lowe, Carrington, Leggett, Hinson, and Austin on the court, like who are you bringing in? The twins, Will Jeffers, Federico.
Yeah, there needs to be some sort of balance in the in the rotation. So like I don't think they're ever going to start 3 guards, but like they probably should play the 3 guards together a lot. But I do think like at times like you can't have them all out there at once. There's got to be some sort of balance.
Yeah, and you're gonna run them down. I mean, like you have to ultimately rotate them. You have to get into that 3-guard Monty because even like starting them, I guess if you started them and then you'd bring in Austin or something for one of them, right? For Leggett or Carrington. Here's a question though. Does Lowe, is he now the guard who should get the most minutes in your view?
It's hard to say, like, because there was times like yesterday, like Leggett didn't play a lot in the second half, and it was pretty clear like Bub needed to sit. Like nothing good. Bub wasn't doing anything good.
Yeah.
And like Lowe and Leggett were their best options. So I don't know if Leggett was like 100%, but he didn't play many minutes in the second half, and that was interesting to me. But it's hard to keep Jalen Lowe off the court right now. He's been the only player within the course of the season to really show like a huge sign of improvement.
Yeah, I agree. And last night it was 35 minutes for Carrington, 32 for Lowe. They both played 18 minutes in the second half. To your point, Leggett played 6 minutes in the second half. So, I always say about the who should start, who should come off the bench. It all works itself out with the minutes. Like I'm far more interested in, who gets the most minutes than I am about, who starts on the court, who's on the court for the tip off. There's always the immortal legend of John DeGroat, who would start games and play 2 minutes and then never be seen again. And that was like what happened for an entire season or something. So you could always do that. It doesn't matter who starts, but minutes wise, I think Leggett has to be pretty even with Carrington, if not above, just based on the way they're playing right now. I thought somebody mentioned, somebody said it in here, maybe on the boards. Like, you wouldn't put Carrington on the bench to start. I know I just gave this whole thing about I don't care who starts, but would you bring Carrington off the bench, start Lowe and Leggett? Like on Saturday, would you?
Yeah, I mean, my philosophy has always been like I don't care who starts either. Like it's always about minutes, but I don't know if he needs to like just kind of sit and watch. Like you always hear like the great six men, like who have ever played basketball. They're always like, I like watching those first 5 minutes to kind of see how the game goes. Then I can kind of pick my spots. So I don't know if he needs that, but going scoreless like that was not a good sign, and it's not a good trend for it's been going on for about since the first Syracuse game. So
yeah. Let's see. We've got just a couple minutes left. Just to change course real quick. They did announce the new assistant coaches yesterday. What are your thoughts on Jacob Bernowski, Jeremy Darvo, and Lindsey Lamar? I guess we talked. Did we talk about this earlier?
I think last week we talked about it a little, but like I don't know if we were saying their names out loud yet.
I think earlier, didn't we talk about how Narduzzi is? Oh yeah, because we were talking. Somebody asked about coaches, about how Cable hasn't changed coaches, but Narduzzi has, and then we started talking about how all these guys are young and he's gone in different directions. But anyway, these are three people who have never been in my kitchen: Bronowski, Darvo, and Lamar. Other than that, I know nothing. I knew nothing about them prior to coming across their names, and obviously done some research since then. But what, were any of these guys on your radar before, and what stands out to you about them?
On my radar before, no. I mean, I guess we probably should have been monitoring the Western Carolina staff a little bit. But the way I look at like just a brief, quick 20-second summary on all three guys. If anyone knows how to block for Cade Bell's offense, it's the offensive line coach he just worked with the past couple of years. So in that sense, that hire makes a lot of sense to me. Then I look at Lamar Lindsey. I mean, I really like because he's from Tampa. He has great Tampa ties, played for South Florida, but he also has good DMV ties because playing at Howard. And so I think from a recruiting standpoint, I think he's the exact type of like profile you would want to hire as a running back coach. Then, I mean, Bronowski, I think he's one of the best special teams coaches in the country. Like Miami's, like they had a great kicker and punter, but like their coverages were great. Their return yardage was great. And so I do have questions about him coaching tight ends, but also from a recruiting standpoint, like he should have a good kind of connection in, Cincinnati, Columbus, that area, which Pitt recruits anyway. So, I mean, they all make sense, individually on their own. I know everyone's overall collective worry is that, the whole offensive staff is this young. And I get that.
Yeah, it is. It's there. I mean, they've all been around for a few years. They don't quite have the experience that Borbely or Powell or Salem had. But yeah, they are on the young side. I do agree about Darvo, about the offensive line coach. What I keep coming back to is, this offense needs to work right now. This isn't wait and, get the players used to it, and then in 2025 it really takes off. It needs to take off this year. Year one of this offense needs to be really good. And one way to help accelerate that, well, you're not going to accelerate that if the offensive line coach is learning the offense right along with the players. But he already knows the offense. And I think that takes a step out of the process that helps, and he should be able to do a better job of teaching it to the players. I mean, like you said, I think that helps the whole thing just move along. Running back, wide receiver, tight end, not as much. But offensive line, they've got to know the offense. You've got a coach who knows it. I thought in the press release, Pat Narduzzi had a quote about Bronowski, talking about his special teams, saying that his special teams units are, quote, extremely organized and they executed at a high level. And I thought that was interesting language and pointed language about what he wants and needs. I mean, kind of like you said, if you have a good kicker, you have a good kicker. It doesn't necessarily mean you're a great special teams coach. If you have a good punter, you have a good punter. It doesn't necessarily, and same thing with a returner. It doesn't necessarily mean you're a great special teams coach. But if you can consistently cover kicks, consistently cover punts, you don't give up any extra yardage, any of those hidden yards or third phase of the game yardage. You're always putting guys the 25 or inside the 25 or inside the 20 consistently. You can do that with scheme. You can do that by coaching and execution. And I think that's what Pitt needs. If they get a great kicker somewhere, Andre Powell wasn't a great special teams coordinator because, Ben Sauls made 5 field goals in the Sun Bowl, and he wasn't a terrible special teams coordinator because Caleb Junko stunk this year. That was those individual guys. They have their own coaches and all that stuff. But you need to have a consistent, like I say, like coverage units. You need to have a good scheme that's well put together and you can execute. And it's interesting that this hire seems to be made for special teams. Bernowski coached tight ends at like Robert Morris 5 years ago, but that's not, that's it on his resume as far as tight ends go. This was a hire made for special teams, it seems. And I think that's interesting too. Do you read into that was, getting a special teams coordinator or getting a good special teams coordinator was prioritized ahead of getting a good tight ends coach?
I think it's interesting. And I also think there might have been a little sense that Bronowski was probably a little bit more of a hot commodity than the other two, but other schools may have only liked him as a special teams coordinator. And I think, Pitt offering him a position coach was definitely interesting to him. And I think it probably helped seal the deal in a little, in some senses. So I think they're taking a little bit of a gamble there, but at the same time, I mean, I think it's worth it. I mean, just going back the past 2 years, like how many punts have they had blocked? It's like and they survived them too. I think like the backyard brawl, like the 2022 first game of the year, they had a punt block and somehow still won the game. Like usually you don't win games if you have a punt block for a touchdown. And I think Duke last year, there was 3 last year and maybe 1 this past year. Like it's too many.
Well, they also blocked a punt for a touchdown at Virginia Tech. That was a scoop and score, right? That was a sack that Braylon Lovelace. That's right. But they did. When did Biles blocked a punt at West Virginia and Virginia Tech?
A lot of punts. Yeah,
he blocked 2. Was the other one at Virginia Tech? Did he block more than 2? I thought he blocked 2, but either way, that I think that's interesting on the tight end front or on the special teams front. Somebody, I think on the message boards or maybe you might have said it, was like, tight ends, yeah, it's a position, they need coaching and all this stuff, but you can kind of like, they can spend their practice time, like half of their time with the offensive line, lining up next to tackles, learning about combo blocks and stuff. And then the other half with the wide receivers running routes, right? I mean, it's sort of a position that's kind of a mix of the two that, yes, they obviously have to have their own coach. And this guy, I mean, his background, he's been coaching defense a lot, but I think he was a quarterback in college, right? And like I say, coached tight ends at Robert Morris, so he's not completely unfamiliar with the offensive side of the ball. So it's not completely new for him, but I don't know. If there was a position that you were going to be like, it's not as much of a priority, I think tight end could probably be it. I mean, maybe he'll recruit tight ends. Maybe he'll Go out and get guys, and we'll see. But remember, it's Lindsay Lamar, not Lamar Lindsay.
Did I say it backwards?
You got it backwards, Jim. We're going to have a problem with this. I think Hillgrove is going to have an issue with this too, especially when like Cam Lindsay is on the team. And so you're in that like mode of thinking that, there's somebody named Lindsay. I bet we'll hear a lot of Lamar Lindsays, but I'm looking at his Twitter page right now. It's Lindsay Lamar. So get that straight. You know what? We'll actually end the podcast. We'll end the live stream now. So you can go back and practice saying Lindsay Lamar. So are you Googling it to find out if that's what it is?
No, this is kind of like a funny thing, but like during this whole like transfer portal thing, I could never remember the Nebraska cornerback's name, like Taman Lynham, and every time I would type it out, it would be wrong, and like I would have to like it was just like one name like I just couldn't grasp, and like so like I'd be like, this is the 5th transfer they landed in addition to, then I'd be like, what's his name again? I just couldn't say his name. I don't know.
On Nebraska's site, they have one of those like pronunciation things that he himself. If you go to Pitt's site and you click on the little like pronunciation for a roster name, I don't know if you ever do that, but it's our friend RJ in the media relations department saying every player's name. On the Nebraska official website, they have the player himself say his name, so you really know, and it's like Taman Lynham, but so you really know how he wants to pronounce it. But it'll be interesting to see what Hillgrove comes up with on that. And I got a recording of the long snapper from UConn, how to pronounce his name. Our friend Jerry DePaula sourced that out as a good reporter. He found a recording of how to say that kid's name. And so I have it. I just haven't mastered it yet. So,
okay.
I guess Hillgrove's going to have Mr. Hillgrove's going to have some extra work to do there. But anyway, all right, we'll sign off there. Thanks everybody for tuning in tonight. And, all the comments, all the questions in the chat. We appreciate that for sure. Make sure you like this video and subscribe so you don't miss any of our Pitt video content here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com, and check out the website Panther-Lair.com. Thanks everybody for tuning in or watching this later in the week. We appreciate that. Jim, thank you for your time. As always, everybody will be back tomorrow morning with another morning Pitt. We'll have a mailbag on Friday and then the live stream post game on Saturday after the Duke game. So lots of stuff to do right here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. So enjoy the rest of your night, and we'll talk to you tomorrow morning for the morning Pit right here, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.